Usually kapag pinag-uusapan natin ang isang medical diagnosis, parang there's this expectation of absolute precision. Parang engineering lang, di ba?
Right, very exact.
Oo, parang you break your arm, tapos the x-ray shows that jagged white line, tapos ituturo lang ng doktor at sasabihin, there it is, broken or not broken. It's clean, it's binary, and it's comforting because we like things to be visible and categorized into neat little boxes.
We want a clear yes or no.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of real estate valuation and biglang, that x-ray machine is broken. Parang we're looking at a pricing landscape that is diagnostically murky.
Murky is definitely the right word for it.
As a billion-dollar skyscraper sitting in the middle of a financial district, it doesn't possess one absolute price tag waiting to be discovered. Value isn't a physical property like mass or volume. Ako si Rexel, and today we are throwing out that broken x-ray machine para maintindihan kung paano ba talaga nilalagyan ng presyo ang mga property sa Pilipinas nang hindi nanguhula.
And to really understand why this market is so complex, kailangan natin ng malalim na analysis sa mga mechanisms na nagpapatakbo rito. Nandito si Rexel para himayin ang source materials natin sa deep dive na ito.
Yes, deep dive talaga ito.
Our mission today is to unpack the Philippine Valuation Standards, or PVS, the evolving code of conduct para sa mga valuers natin, at syempre yung structural overhaul na dala ng Republic Act No. 12,001 or the RPPRA law.
That's a massive law.
It is. Ang buong ecosystem na ito ang nagdidetermine hindi lang ng presyo ng mga bahay at lupa, kundi pati na rin ng buwis na binabayaran mo at ng stability ng buong ekonomiya natin.
Bago natin buksan ang usapin sa batas, let's establish the core philosophy muna. Paano pa natin kinocompute ang isang bagay na walang absolute price tag?
That's the million-dollar question.
Literally. When I was organizing the, let's call it the Rex Guide to Property Pricing, para sa deep dive na ito, the most fundamental takeaway is that price shifts depending on the buyer, the objective, and the environment.
So true. Iba-iba talaga ang lente.
Dito na pumapasok ang Philippine Valuation Standards, which the Bureau of Local Government Finance, yung BLGF, and the Department of Finance started aligning with the International Valuation Standards. Nagsimula ito sa first edition noong 2009, tapos umusad noong 2017, at ngayon, the framework is heavily tied to the IVS 2025.
And ang pinaka-foundation ng lahat ng ito ay ang tinatawag nilang basis of value.
Right, the basis.
Ang pinaka-common na naririnig natin dyan ay ang market value. Under the standards, this is the estimated amount para sa isang transaction between a willing buyer and a willing seller.
Okay, willing buyer, willing seller.
Yes, at ang crucial element doon ay ang acting prudently at walang compulsion. This is what we call an arm's length transaction. Walang pressure, walang nagmamadali, at parehong panig ay may sapat na impormasyon tungkol sa property.
Which means the moment a bank threatens to foreclose your house, you are completely out of market value territory, diba?
Oh, absolutely. That changes the entire game.
Kung gagamit ako ng analogy para sa inyo na nakikinig, isipin mo yung pagbenta ng pre-loved na limited edition sneakers online. Kung nakapost lang siya at naghihintay ka ng tamang collector na babayad ng asking price mo, that's market value.
Right, kasi you have time.
Pero kung kailangan mo ng cash bukas na bukas pang ospital, ibabagsak mo ang presyo para mabenta agad. That mechanism is defined in the standards as a forced sale.
Tapos, you have the complete opposite of a forced sale, which is the synergistic value.
Synergistic. Wait, paano yan?
Ito yung mathematical anomaly, kung saan kapag pinagsama mo ang dalawang assets, the combined value is suddenly higher than the sum of its parts.
Ah, okay. Can you give an example?
Sure. Think of two small separate lots next to each other. Individually, baka residential lang ang pwede itayo, so limited yung value. But if a developer buys both and merges the titles...
Biglang lumaki yung footprint.
Exactly. Biglang pasok na sa zoning requirement para tayuan ng isang high-rise commercial condo. The synergy created a massive premium on the price.
Okay, so the standard defines the basis, kumbaga, kung anong lens ang gagamitin natin sa pagtingin sa presyo. Pero this raises a massive logical question for me.
Ano yun?
Kung market value ang hinahanap natin, paano nasisiguro ng PVS na pareho ang magiging computation ng isang appraiser sa Makati at ng isang appraiser sa malayong probinsya?
That's a very valid concern.
Kasi if they're just looking at, market sentiment, isn't that still incredibly subjective and prone to human error?
Dinadala tayo niyan sa transition from abstract art to rigorous science. Kasi IBS 2025 explicitly removes the feeling ko lang aspect of pricing.
Bawal na yung hula-hula.
Bawal na bawal. It mandates specific mathematical models. May tatlong pangunahing approaches ang the math behind the value, the market approach, the income approach, at the cost approach.
Let's unpack the mechanisms of each. Tapos unahin natin ang market approach. If I'm deducing this correctly, ito yung hahanap ka ng comparables, di ba?
Yes, comparables or comps.
Titingnan mo kung magkano na ibenta yung bahay ng kapitbahay mo last month and you base your property's value on that. Sounds simple enough.
Ang catch doon is no two properties are perfectly identical, even in the same subdivision. So the valuer cannot just copy-paste the neighbor's price.
May adjustments na kailangan gawin?
Correct. The valuer has to apply mathematical adjustments. Isang magandang halimbawa dyan sa notes ni Rexel is the discount for lack of marketability, or DLOM.
Discount for lack of marketability. Okay, break that down.
If you own shares in a publicly traded real estate company, you can sell them on your phone in 3 seconds. Liquid siya.
Right, super liquid.
But if you own a bizarrely shaped, landlocked property, it might take you 2 years to find a willing buyer. That extreme lack of liquidity mathematically reduces the value of your asset compared to highly liquid benchmarks.
So the formula inherently penalizes you if your asset is hard to turn into cash.
Exactly. It's an illiquidity discount.
And on the flip side, sa notes na nakompile ko, there is also an upward adjustment called the control premium.
Yes, the control premium is fascinating.
Diba, kung bibili ka ng 51% share ng isang property holding company versus 49%, mas mahal yung per share price ng 51%. Kasi you are literally buying the power to fire the management and dictate operational decisions. You pay a premium for control.
Spot on. Now, moving to the second mathematical model, we have the income approach.
Ito yung para sa mga negosyo, di ba?
Correct. Ginagamit ito para sa mga assets na ang primary purpose ay kumita ng pera, tulad ng mga commercial buildings, tollways, o factories. The standard here is the discounted cash flow method, or DCF.
The famous DCF model.
Fino-forecast ng valuer ang lahat ng kikitain ng property for let's say the next 10 years, and then mathematically brings that future money back to its present value today.
Let's pause and translate that mechanism para sa inyo na nakikinig kasi this is heavy finance stuff. Why do we need to discount future money?
Good point to clarify.
Basically, it's the time value of money. 1,000,000 peso ngayon is not the same as 1,000,000 peso 10 years from now.
Totoo yan. Lumi ka sa inflation.
Kasi kung may 1 million ka ngayon, pwede mo yang ilagay sa negosyo o sa bonds at tutubo yan. Plus, inflation will eat away at its purchasing power. So the formula uses a discount rate to account for inflation, lost opportunity, and the specific risk of that property.
And this is where it gets very technical.
And from what I understand, even a tiny 1% tweak in that discount rate can completely swing the final valuation by hundreds of millions of pesos.
Oo, sobrang sensitive ng DCF dyan. At hindi lang natatapos sa 10-year forecast ang computation. Kailangan ding isama sa formula ang terminal value.
Terminal value? So what happens at year 11?
Exactly. Kapag nag-forecast ka ng 10 years ng rent income para sa isang office building, at the end of year 10, the building doesn't just vaporize into thin air, di ba?
Nandyan pa rin yung semento.
The physical asset still exists and still holds intrinsic worth. The terminal value captures the aggregated worth of the asset beyond the forecast period, pushing it back into today's present value.
Makes total sense. I get how that works for a condo or a toll plaza, but if I'm looking at, say, a highly specialized chemical processing plant or a custom-built observatory.
Mga unique properties.
Oo, walang comparable sa market para sa market approach at baka wala ring clear independent revenue stream para sa income approach. So I'm assuming you literally just have to calculate the price of the bricks, the steel, and the labor to build it from scratch.
You just perfectly described the mechanism of the cost approach.
So that's the third one.
Yes. An underlying economic logic dito is that a rational buyer will never pay more for a property than what it would cost them to build an exact equivalent themselves.
Bakit nga naman ako bibili ng mahal kung pwede kong ipatayo ng mas mura?
Exactly. Dito, the valuer has to choose between two starting points. First is replacement cost, which computes the price of building a modern equivalent using current standard materials.
Okay, replacement. And the other one?
Or reproduction cost, which computes the price of creating an exact physical replica using the original, often outdated or expensive materials.
But obviously, you can't price a 30-year-old building like it's brand new. You have to subtract something from that total cost.
And that deduction is what we call obsolescence. And may tatlong klaseng obsolescence na kino-compute. First is physical deterioration.
Literally the wear and tear, like a leaking roof.
Right. Second is functional obsolescence. Isipin mo ang isang lumang 5-story office building na walang elevator shaft.
Oh, wow, pahirapan yun.
Even if the concrete is perfectly intact, its functional utility is outdated for today's market standards, so its value drops.
In the third one is economic obsolescence, which is fascinating because this has nothing to do with the building itself.
It's totally external.
Because if you build a massive, beautiful gas station, tapos the local government builds a new bypass road that diverts 90% of the traffic away from your street, your property loses value purely because of external market forces.
Yes, that's economic obsolescence in action.
Wait, magpupush back ako dyan sa mechanism na yan.
Sige, paano?
If we use the cost approach for a 150-year-old ancestral house, applying economic and functional obsolescence would drastically drop its mathematical value, di ba? Pero in reality, yung kalumaan at history pa nga minsan ang nagpapataas ng presyo sa market. How does the standard fix that contradiction?
Ang galing ng point na yan. Ang solution ng PVS 2025 dyan ay ang tinatawag na reconciliation phase.
Reconciliation, so pinagbabangga yung data.
Yes, the valuer doesn't just pick one approach and ignore the rest. Often, they run multiple approaches. Kung ang cost approach gives a low value because of physical age, but the market approach gives a very high value because historical properties are trending among wealthy buyers, the valuer must reconcile the data.
So, ipag-a-add lang tapos i-divide by 2?
No, absolutely not. The IVS explicitly forbids simply adding the two numbers and dividing by 2. Lazy averaging is banned.
So you can't just find a cheap middle ground. You have to actively decide which data is stronger.
Ang mekanismo is assigning weight to each approach based sa reliability ng data na nakuha mo. Kung mas marami at mas verifiable yung recent sales data ng mga ancestral homes sa lugar na yon compared sa construction cost estimates, the market approach is given a heavier percentage weight in the final calculation.
Okay, looking at all these mechanisms, the adjustments, the discount rates, the obsolescence, it's clear that the math is rigorously structured to eliminate guesswork. The formulas are airtight.
Very airtight.
Pero, because that discount rate is so sensitive, the entire mathematical illusion shatters if the valuer punching the calculator is corrupt, biased, or just plain incompetent.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So how does the system police the humans executing the math?
That introduces the human element of valuation, the code of conduct. The PVS heavily emphasizes that a valuation must be performed by an honest and competent professional valuer, free of bias and self-interest.
Kasi the moment the public stops believing in the numbers, the banking sector and the real estate market collapse.
Ang ultimate function ng code na ito ay hindi lang para sumunod sa rules, kundi para i-preserve ang public trust.
If a bank can't trust the valuation of the collateral, they stop lending money. Sa notes na tiningnan ko under the ethics framework, it's very strict. Kasama dyan ang absolute confidentiality, being impartial, at mandatory declaration of conflict of interest.
Very strict.
You cannot represent two opposing sides in a transaction without written informed consent from both.
At ang nagbabantay sa mga professionals na ito sa Pilipinas ay ang Professional Regulatory Board of Real Estate Service or PRBESS under the PRC.
So, regulated talaga siya.
Yes. This regulatory environment is backed by the RESA law, or Republic Act No. 9646, which was enacted in 2009 with the intention of making our local practitioners globally competitive and accountable.
But here is where we hit a massive, terrifying roadblock.
Uh-oh. The reality check?
Yes, the reality check. When I was going through the Rex files of our source materials, I saw a shocking reality. Back in 2018, nearly a decade after the RESA law was enacted, and after the number of licensed professionals had multiplied tenfold, there was an expert estimate published in an FAU newsletter.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
It stated 90% of all appraisal license holders don't actually have any idea how to do the appraisal.
It's a staggering number.
Wait, 90%? That means if I hire 10 licensed professionals to calculate the value of my life savings, siyam sa kanila ay practically nanguhula lang. How does an entire industry not implode under that level of technical incompetence, lalo na kung pumasa sila sa strict requirements ng PRC exams?
Ang ipinapakita ng statistic na yan is a deep systemic failure in how we define competence. While the sheer volume of licensed individuals skyrocketed, the actual technical capacity on the ground took a massive dive.
So pumapasa sila pero hindi nila alam yung ginagawa nila sa field.
Exactly. Ang mechanism kasi ng board exams is largely theoretical and multiple choice. But passing a multiple choice test is vastly different from standing in an empty industrial lot, pulling up market data, and accurately projecting a 10-year discounted cash flow model.
Theory versus practice.
Yes, the compliance became paper-heavy, focused on having the license rather than having the practical field experience required by the PVS.
That is incredibly dangerous for an ordinary investor. Financial instability begins when personal assumptions and pure guesswork are disguised as objective, regulated facts.
It affects everything.
If assessors are just making up numbers, you get wild inequities in property taxation at the local level. Some people pay too much, others pay almost nothing.
At nakita yan ng gobyerno. The government clearly saw this massive gap. They recognized that outdated values, lack of transparency, and undertrained practitioners were costing the economy billions in uncollected revenues while stunting infrastructure development.
So what was the structural fix?
The government's structural fix for this broken ecosystem is the Republic Act No. 12001, otherwise known as the Real Property Valuation and Assessment Reform Act, or RPVAR.
RPVAR? This is the game changer.
It was signed into law in June 2024, with the implementing rules and regulations issued by December 2024. The law is designed to completely reorganize the system. Isa sa mga major steps nila ay ang pag-reorganize ng BLGF to establish the Real Property Valuation Service or RPVS.
And based on the structural mechanics of the law, ang pinakamalaking shift dito is the establishment of a single valuation base.
Yes, single base na lang.
If I'm deducing the intent correctly, parang para itong pag-synchronize ng lahat ng sirang relo sa buong bansa. Dati kasi, the BIR had its zonal values, the local government units had their own assessed values, and banks used private appraisals. It was an informational mess.
Sobrang gulo dati.
But under RPVAR, the system adopts market value as the singular standard base for all real property taxes and national government transactions. One truth, one baseline.
To ensure that this single baseline doesn't suffer the same fate of becoming completely detached from reality, the law mandates the update of the Schedule of Market Values or the SMV every 3 years.
Mandatory na yan, ha?
Mandatory. Kasi prior to this reform, up to 60% of LGUs were operating on severely outdated data. Some hadn't updated their valuations in decades.
Decades, grabe.
At para may ngipin ang batas, RPVAR includes serious penal provisions. Local government officials, particularly assessors, who fail to prepare and update the SMV or conduct general revisions can face suspension or fines equivalent to 1 to 6 months of their basic salary.
Oh, wow. That removes the political delay tactics na madalas ginagawa ng mga local officials na ayaw magtaas ng buwis bago mag-eleksyon.
Exactly. Wala nang palusot.
But let's look at this from the perspective of the listener, the you factor. If local governments are suddenly forced to update a schedule of market values that has been asleep for 20 years, the paper value of a family home is going to skyrocket, di ba?
Biglang talon ng presyo.
Oo. So dapat ba silang matakot na yung babayaran nilang real property tax bukas ay bigla na lang dodoble o triple? That kind of rate shock could force families out of their homes.
The lawmakers anticipated that economic shock. To prevent mass defaults, the RPVRA includes a specific protection mechanism, a 6% cap limit on the increase of real property taxes during the first year of the new SMV's effectivity.
A 6% cap. Okay, that's a relief.
So even if the mathematical value of your property shoots up by 300% on paper because it's finally aligned with current market rates, the actual tax you pull out of your pocket won't spike violently. It gives the taxpayer time to adjust to the true economic reality of their asset.
That cap is a crucial safety valve. And speaking of easing the financial burden, the law also introduces a tax amnesty provision, diba?
Yes, a very important provision.
Para sa mga property owners na may naipon na unpaid real property taxes, penalties, at surcharges long before the law took effect, they are given a window of 2 years to avail of this amnesty.
Pwede nilang bayaran yan ng unti-unti.
Right. They can settle it through a one-time payment or via installment. It's essentially the government offering a clean slate so that everyone can enter this new, modernized system without the baggage of unpayable legacy debts.
At para masigurong transparent ang new system na nito, the law mandates the creation of the Real Property Information System or RPIS.
So, database ito.
Yes, ito ay isang comprehensive, up-to-date electronic national database na magre-record ng lahat ng sale, exchange, lease, mortgage at iba pang real property transactions sa buong bansa.
If that database works as intended, it completely eliminates the informational asymmetry that plagues the industry. Dati kasi, bad actors could manipulate prices purely because they had access to sales data that the ordinary buyer didn't.
Totoo yan. May mga insider info, kumbaga.
Kapag fully operational na ang RPIS, valuers won't have to guess or rely on rumors about how much the commercial lot across the street sold for. The verified data is right there in the system.
By automating real property tax administration and centralizing this data, LGUs will finally have the real-time empirical evidence they need to accurately execute their mandatory 3-year SMV updates.
Everything is connected.
The RPVRA essentially acts as the legal enforcement mechanism that forces the entire country to actually use the rigorous mathematics required by the Philippine Valuation Standards.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. Ang true value ng isang property, whether it's your family home or a skyscraper, is not just a subjective guess of how much you want to sell it for.
Hindi na pwedeng hula-hula.
Nakita natin na ito ay isang masalimuot na resulta ng mahigpit na global standards at complex mathematics through the PVS and its 3 approaches. It relies heavily on the ethical integrity of human valuers bound by a strict code of conduct to maintain public trust.
At ngayon, backed by a strong law.
Exactly. It is being structurally enforced by a landmark reform, the RPVRA, to ensure that the data is transparent, synchronized, and continuously updated without causing economic shock to the taxpayer.
It's an ambitious shift meant to transform a murky, fragmented landscape into a standardized, unassailable chain of evidence.
And as we end this deep dive, I want to leave you with a provocative thought.
Ano yon?
Sa pagpasok nitong Real Property Information System database, magkakaroon tayo ng unprecedented level of digitized real estate data. The raw materials for valuation will be universally accessible. In the coming decades, as artificial intelligence becomes capable of instantly computing complex, discounted cash flow models, analyzing thousands of comparables, and quantifying obsolescence in a fraction of a second,
I see where this is going.
kailangan pa kaya nating ng mga human valuers o ang human ethics at ang kakayahang intindihin ang nuance ng isang komunidad na lang ba ang natitirang dahilan para hindi natin ipaubaya ang buong real estate market sa mga AI algorithms?
That is a deeply existential question for the industry. If the mathematical X-ray machine becomes perfectly automated and flawless, what happens to the diagnostic role of the doctor?
Something to mull over habang tinitingnan mo ang property tax declaration mo next year and you wonder just how much math and law went into that single number. Muli, this is a certified deep dive. Ako si Rex,
At ako naman, si Rexel.
reminding you that knowledge is power, lalo na kapag ang pinag-uusapan ay ang proteksyon ng inyong mga investments at buwis. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Catch you on the next one.